Freddy and Juan's Dredge just exposed the biggest hidden jackpot in Yukon history. $150 million in lost gold, sealed under ice since the 1940s. What started as an $80,000 scrap buy turned into a blackout-level discovery buried beneath a government cover-up. Files deleted, agents showing up, and a single gold bar proving it all was real. Smash that like button, subscribe now, and let's break down how two miners uncovered a secret vault worth more than every gold rush cleanup combined. It started with an $80,000 gamble, an abandoned 1940s dredge rotting on the outskirts of Dawson City. To most, it was scrap metal. To Freddy and Juan, it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. Locals whispered the usual warnings. The dredge was cursed. Every owner before them had vanished or gone bankrupt. Machinery failures, sudden sinkings, entire crews walking off mid-season. It was more ghost story than mining site. But Freddy didn't believe in curses. He believed in overlooked pay, and the first clue came fast. While inspecting the rusted belly of the dredge, he noticed something strange. Sealed steel compartments packed with frozen gravel. These weren't waste bins. They were locked off intentionally, as if someone wanted that material untouched. Juan chipped out a sample, ran a quick assay, and froze. The reading showed gold traces 10 times higher than average Yukon dirt, rich enough to make even Tony Beats jealous. Whatever had been sealed inside those chambers wasn't random. It was hidden on purpose. They didn't tell anyone. Not Discovery, not even close friends. Instead, Freddy and Juan decided to restore the dredge in secret, off the books, under the radar. Their theory was simple. The machine wasn't just abandoned, it was buried mid-strike. Somewhere under that twisted steel was untouched pay, sealed away since the 1940s. While gutting the control room for rewiring, Juan's flashlight caught something wedged behind a corroded instrument panel. A hidden drawer, soldered shut, coated in grime. Inside, yellowed papers, original engineering blueprints of the dredge, with red ink notes that shouldn't exist. The annotations circled a mysterious feature labeled Secondary Recovery Sluice, Channel X. The weird part? There was no record of any Channel X in company archives, no mention in the registry. It was as if a second sluice system had been built and erased from history. Freddy's mind went straight to motive. Why build a secret sluice? Maybe the foreman or company owners had used it to skim gold off the books. Maybe that's where the missing tonnage from the Yukon War years went. Either way, the answer was underground. If Channel X was real, it meant an entire section of the dredge had never been mined, never even mapped. They decided to find it. Using modern sonar and ground-penetrating radar, they began a full perimeter scan of the dredge site. The readings came back insane, metallic reflections buried under 40 feet of ice. Not scattered flakes, but dense, solid echoes, like the bucket line itself had frozen mid-haul. It looked like the dredge had literally swallowed its final strike before the crew sealed it shut. When Juan ran an assay drill near the coordinates, the numbers shattered every record they'd seen. Over 900 grams per ton. That's not pay dirt. That's pure fortune. They re-ran the test 3 times. Same result. Juan's quick math put the potential yield somewhere north of $150 million if the channel stretched beyond the dredge. Freddy didn't speak at first. Then came the grin. "We don't tell a soul," he said. Not Discovery, not anyone. Because if they were right, Channel X wasn't just a lost sluice. It was a frozen gold vault, sealed since World War II. And if one word leaked, the Yukon would turn into a battlefield. That night, they made good on that promise. No cameras, no chatter, just 2 miners moving under floodlights dimmed to red as the generators hummed. Freddy fired up the steam jets, while Juan set the diesel burners along the trench, the ground hissing and cracking open beneath them. Ice boiled, fog rolled, and the dredge itself seemed to groan awake. Within hours, the permafrost gave way, revealing a corridor that shouldn't exist. The walls weren't natural. They were riveted steel, perfectly aligned, like a tunnel built to hide something big. As they dug deeper, their instruments started going haywire. The magnetic field spiked, sensors flickered, and the drone feed glitched into static. Juan hit the scanner again, thinking it was a bad connection, but the readings were pulsing, consistent bursts like a signal. Something metallic was alive down there, humming faintly below their feet. Freddy didn't stop. He hooked up the old dredge winch, lowered the first bucket, and started hauling. The dredge groaned like a living thing, gears screaming as the rusted chain dragged out compacted black gravel that glittered even under the work lights. In the slurry, thick veins of gold running through it. Not flakes, not nuggets. Lines of pure metal embedded like arteries in rock. When they tipped the first full bucket, something clanged against the side of the hopper. A small steel plate, covered in grime. Freddy wiped it clean and froze. Stamped into the surface were 3 characters. SG-07, Private Vault Zone. No one had ever mentioned such a zone in any of the dredge's blueprints or maps. Juan scrolled through the scanned archive again. Nothing. No record, no mention, not even a company tag. It didn't fit any industrial code of the period. Freddy knew then they hadn't just broken into an abandoned tunnel. They'd breached a hidden vault. This wasn't built to process gold. It was built to hide it. By dawn, they'd cleared enough to restore the old recovery line. Freddy patched the sluice, rebuilt the pump housing, and fed in 10 hours of sample material from the trench. They watched in silence as the concentrate collected along the mats, the gold lines thickening until they practically glowed under the floodlight. When the cleanup tray finally poured out, both men went still. It wasn't raw placer gold, it was refined, smooth, uniform, and nearly pure. The assay confirmed it. 98% gold purity, unheard of for natural Yukon material. Freddy ran the numbers again. 10 hours of dirt, $12 million in yield. That wasn't pay dirt, that was vault-grade treasure. Juan noticed something else in the tailings. Hardened lumps of black slag fused with tiny beads of tungsten and mercury. He cracked one open and saw the telltale shimmer of gold residue inside. Smelting waste. Whoever worked this site decades ago wasn't mining. They were refining on location. They'd set up an illegal smelter, melted their own bars, and hidden them under the ice. Freddy's eyes narrowed. They were cleaning gold that wasn't theirs, he muttered. This whole dredge was a front. That theory became fact later that night when they searched the foreman's cabin, now half collapsed under snow. Behind a rusted stove panel, Freddy pried loose a fireproof tin box wrapped in oilcloth. Inside lay a water-stained logbook, its pages warped and fragile but still legible. The handwriting was meticulous. Lists of runs, yield tallies, crew rosters, and then a different section began. 14 undocumented entries marked Confidential Batch, SG Series. Each line listed production totals that didn't match any official record. 1 ton, 2, 6. The last entry stopped abruptly midway through a sentence, followed by a scrawled warning. Lockdown at 11:43. All vault contents sealed under ice. Juan flipped through the rest, but the pages beyond were blank. Freddy scanned the old Yukon archives for any mention of an SG series operation and found it. A mining company called Northern Dominion Resources shut down in 1949 after declaring insolvency when its final shipment of bullion vanished in transit. The bankruptcy notice mentioned government seizure of all remaining assets, but none of the recovered gold matched the company's books. That missing shipment? Valued at today's prices, it would equal roughly $150 million. Freddy and Juan exchanged a long, silent look as the implications hit. the sealed trench, the smelting slag, the vault marker SG-07. Everything lined up. They hadn't stumbled onto an ordinary pocket. They had unearthed the lost gold cache of Northern Dominion. Gold hidden deliberately before federal seizure, entombed under ice and forgotten for 75 years. Freddy leaned over the logbook one last time and whispered, "This isn't a mine anymore. It's a crime scene frozen in time." They sealed the cabin, shut off the comms, and tried to process what they'd uncovered. But isolation only made the silence louder. Even the generators felt too noisy, the floodlights too exposed. For the first time all season, Freddy kept his revolver by the cot. The first sign something was wrong came just after midnight, a set of headlights cutting across the snow ridge above camp. Freddy killed the floodlights instantly. Through the thermal lens of their drone, a black SUV appeared, moving slow, circling the perimeter with precision. No markings, no plates visible in the low light. It stopped once near the fuel drums, then idled for several minutes before backing off toward the tree line. Juan recorded everything. When they reviewed the footage later, the SUV's headlights flickered twice. Too deliberate to be coincidence, like a signal to whoever might be watching. Within hours, strange emails started hitting their satellite inbox. No sender name, no subject line, just encrypted attachments showing aerial shots of their site, perfectly framed from above. Some were taken that same night. Others showed days-old work they hadn't posted anywhere. Juan traced the IP trail. It bounced through multiple VPNs before routing back to a holding company in Vancouver. That company, he discovered, was a subsidiary of a private equity group, one that had owned the Dredge lease before it changed hands. Freddy didn't buy the timing. Someone knew what they'd found and was watching to see how far they'd go before stepping in. They shut everything down. Radios silent, phones off, no social media updates, no calls to Discovery. Freddy even cut the generator's beacon signal to avoid traceable frequencies. From that point, the site became a bunker. Cameras covered, motion sensors armed, drones on patrol every 3 hours. They operated like men under siege, aware that a single slip could cost them the find of their lives. Freddy suspected whoever was behind the SUV wasn't after fame or footage. They wanted control. Ownership of what lay buried beneath that ice vault. Juan focused on proof. He set up a portable 3D sonar rig, normally used for underwater salvage, and began scanning the frozen vault they'd breached. The data feed came in slow, pixel by pixel, as the scanner mapped the void beneath their feet. When the model completed, both men just stared. The cavity wasn't random, it was geometric structured. A rectangular chamber reinforced with riveted plates, its floor marked by evenly spaced metallic blocks. When Juan enhanced the image, the reflections told the story. Not gravel, not equipment. Bars. Solid masses consistent with refined gold ingots. He zoomed in on the array. 12 rows, each containing roughly 100 stacked units. If accurate, that meant at least 1,200 bars. Juan overlaid density calculations from the sonar readings. Each block averaged 60 pounds. Freddy grabbed a notepad, did the math out loud. At current market prices, that chamber held roughly $150 million in gold. The readings also revealed something else. At the far end of the cavity, a collapsed tunnel leading to what had once been a narrow access shaft. Someone had intentionally detonated it, sealing the vault forever. Freddy didn't speak for a long moment. Then he exhaled, steady and quiet. "They didn't lose this gold," he said. "They buried it on purpose." Juan nodded. "And someone still thinks it belongs to them." They decided to move fast, extract small loads at a time, stash them off-site before word spread. But the ground had other plans. During the first prep run, as they reactivated the Dredge's lower intake, the entire system buckled under pressure. A sharp crack tore through the hull, followed by a roar like thunder. Water surged up from below, flooding the compartment in seconds. Freddy yanked the cut-off valve, but it was too late. The trench was filling as if something beneath them had ruptured. Juan scrambled for the power controls, but alarms were already screaming. The sonar feed spiked with sudden thermal surges, rapid temperature jumps deep underground. Freddy checked the sensor logs. Buried diesel drums, likely from the old operation, rupturing as heat and pressure built inside the ice. The thaw had triggered a chain reaction. The vault wasn't just melting, it was collapsing. Within minutes, the dredge tilted sharply to port. One of the stabilizer pylons gave way, and part of the hull vanished into the slurry. Juan barely made it out, hauling himself up a frozen ladder as the trench walls caved inward. Steam hissed through the cracks as black water swallowed the lower deck. Freddy reached for the salvage crate and ripped it open. Inside, mud, gravel, and something solid wrapped in burlap. He tore the fabric back and stared at what lay inside. A single gold bar, gleaming even through the grime. Stamped clean across its surface, SG-07, the same marking from the vault plate. The weight was undeniable, dense, heavy, unmistakably real. Freddy held it under the flashlight beam, water dripping from his gloves. It wasn't theory anymore. The SG series existed. The vault was real, and the gold of Northern Dominion hadn't been stolen. It had been entombed under their feet, waiting for someone reckless enough to dig it out. Juan limped over, soaked and shivering, eyes locked on the bar. "That's the proof," he said quietly. Freddy nodded once. "And now they know we have it." The camera drones above captured the last frame before the feed cut. Two figures silhouetted against the burning work lights, a flooded dredge sinking into the ice, and a single gold bar glinting in Freddy's hands as the Yukon night closed around them. By morning, the valley was silent. No power, no signal, just the crack of cooling metal where the dredge had gone under. They stayed put, waiting for help that never came. But on the second night, the hum of engines echoed faintly through the fog, growing louder with every hour until it sounded like an approaching swarm. Freddy knew then the silence hadn't been safety. It was staging. Within 72 hours of the flood, everything around the site changed. The morning after the collapse, Freddy woke to the distant chop of helicopter blades echoing through the valley. By noon, 4 white trucks bearing the Yukon regulatory seal rolled up the access road, engines idling in formation like a convoy. The lead inspector barely looked at their paperwork before handing Freddy an envelope stamped Emergency Safety Order. Immediate cessation of operations. Officially, it cited environmental instability and risk of chemical contamination. Unofficially, it was a shutdown order delivered with precision timing. Freddy scanned the document twice. No mention of the actual cause, no reference to the dredge, just vague legal phrasing about permafrost exposure and hazardous materials. It read less like a safety notice and more like a scripted removal plan. By dusk, the same black SUV appeared again, but this time it wasn't alone. 2 more vehicles followed, one unmarked, one bearing insignia Freddy didn't recognize. Uniformed agents stepped out, not local police, not miners' enforcement, but federal grade, complete with clipped earpieces and sealed evidence bags. They asked no questions. They handed Freddy and Juan a second notice, declaring the entire site a restricted zone pending environmental remediation. Cameras were banned, drones confiscated. They were ordered to vacate within 48 hours or face criminal penalties. Freddy kept his expression neutral. What they didn't know was that he and Juan had already moved nearly 1/3 of the processed gold off-site, smelted, boxed, and buried under a new claim they'd quietly leased through a proxy. As the agents swept the dredge remains, Juan slipped into the supply tent and sealed one last wooden crate marked industrial waste. Fluid filters. Inside lay the unprocessed concentrate from the SG-07 chamber, still heavy with trace gold. It looked like nothing more than mud-soaked sediment, but Freddy knew what was in it. When the agents cleared the site that night, that same crate rode out in the back of Freddy's flatbed, covered in tarp and dust, unseen among legitimate scrap. For the next week, the Yukon was silent. No one mentioned the dredge on local radio. Discovery's crew called twice, asking for footage from the Lost Dredge project, then stopped altogether. A few days later, a notice went up on Discovery's production bulletin. Project deferred. Material unavailable. Juan checked the network servers remotely, only to find that the entire block of camera data, 48 hours spanning the excavation to the flood, was gone. Every file. The metadata logs had been replaced with unreadable strings of code, and the server backups, stored in Vancouver, mirrored the same corruption. At first, Freddy thought it was a simple system crash, until a crew editor texted him a private warning. Someone had purchased exclusive rights to the footage through a third-party media buyer the day before it vanished. The payment trail led to a defunct subsidiary of the same private equity firm Juan had traced earlier, the one tied to the original dredge ownership. Whatever was in those files wasn't lost. It had been erased on purpose. Juan dug deeper and found one remaining backup, an SD card from a handheld rig he'd used during the last night shift, still in his jacket pocket. When he played it, the footage was shaky and dim, but unmistakable, a row of gold bars glimmering under the dredge floodlights, stamped with the SG-07 mark. The camera panned up to Freddy's face, mud-streaked, eyes wide, and cut out as alarms screamed in the distance. That clip became the only surviving evidence of what they'd uncovered. Freddy transferred it to 3 encrypted drives, sealed them separately, and told Juan, "One day, this comes out." But not yet. Weeks turned into months. Snow buried the valley, erasing the last trace of their excavation. Officially, the site remained closed under federal remediation orders. Unofficially, the dredge was dismantled and hauled away by contract trucks that bore no mining company logos. When spring arrived, new filings began appearing quietly in the territorial registry. Multiple parcels acquired under a new LLC called SGX Mineral Recovery. The listed owners, untraceable shell corporations, but the mailing address pointed straight to an office box Freddy had used for years. Locals started whispering that Freddy and Juan were back in business, this time with silent partners and unlimited capital. Freight logs from Skagway showed unregistered gold shipments crossing southbound, each weighing between 50 and 60 pounds. The cargo manifests used a code prefix, SG-07A. When a customs clerk leaked a portion of the paperwork, it revealed the shipment's destination, a private refinery in Nevada, known for discretional reclamation services. Neither man spoke publicly about the dredge again. In interviews, when asked about the rumored discovery, Freddy laughed it off, calling it TV myth. Juan joked that the old dredge probably sank for a reason. Yet off-camera, both men had changed. Less talkative, more guarded, eyes always scanning the horizon during filming. Discovery never mentioned the missing footage again, nor did they pursue the shutdown story. The official explanation remained a one-line summary on a corporate memo. Production halted due to safety non-compliance. Behind closed doors, though, fragments of truth leaked. A Yukon archivist noted that the original claim number tied to the 1940s dredge had been reactivated under new management. Financial analysts noticed sudden capital infusions into mid-tier gold refiners across Western Canada, all under the same holding pattern. And at a small industrial estate outside Whitehorse, workers quietly unloaded sealed steel containers into a warehouse leased under SGX's name. The manifests listed them as recovered ore tailings. The containers required 4 men each to move. One evening, months after the shutdown, Juan filmed a private clip in his workshop. The camera shook slightly as he pried open a narrow wooden crate. Inside, nested in black velvet, lay a single gold bar stamped with the familiar mark SG07. He didn't speak, didn't look into the camera. He simply rested his hand on the bar, the light catching the engraved numbers, and closed the lid again. Across town, Freddy signed the final incorporation documents for SGX, listing its operational focus as Heritage Mineral Reclamation. The paperwork gave them complete legal control over the parcels surrounding the Dredge Valley. Whatever the government had tried to lock away was now theirs in plain sight. The real gold, the one thing no agent or network could confiscate, was already moving through channels too quiet to trace. Somewhere between Dawson City and Nevada, those shipments continued, routine, anonymous, and invisible beneath layers of corporate filings. But for the few who knew how to read the patterns, the message was clear. The dredge that everyone thought was a disaster had become the front line of a buried empire reborn. Freddy and Juan had turned a forgotten relic into a private fortune, buried in paperwork and silence. The Yukon regulators closed their files. Discovery aired reruns, and deep beneath the frozen ground where it all began, the last remnants of the SG07 vault still glimmered in darkness, waiting for the next thaw, when history would once again claw its way to the surface.